Hey,
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good.
So I'm recording this for my class.
I know.
Um, okay, so basically, the class is for it's like mass media in society. So, and like its impact on us. So this first project is kind of an interview. He said, find an old lady that you know and ask her about the types of media she consumed throughout her life. Um, so
Unfortunately, you couldn't find an old lady,
I
so yeah,
know I know
to me.
nobody. So you're it. I appreciate that you're still helping your 40-year-old son with school projects. That's cool.
That's so cool.
Uh-huh. All right. So uh I guess we'll start with like what were the main forms of, and media can be like what you guys read, watched, listened to, all that kind of, movies, news. I guess primarily we talk about news, but like any kind of media consumption. So, what were the primary forms of media that were consumed in your household when you were growing up?
So always the TV. TV was on 24 hours a day. So, and we're talking, I mean, you want to know like when I was like a little girl, right?
Yeah.
So the television was on. I personally consumed 8 hours of TV a day at on a minimum. I was an only child. So I don't remember a time that if I wasn't playing outside, if I was inside, I was watching television. Um, news wise, news was on one time a day,
Yeah.
6 o'clock. Everybody, after dinner, my grandfather, I live with my grandparents. They stopped. They sat and watched Walter Cronkite. That's when we got our news. Is that and what I remember about news as a little kid, it was during the Vietnam War. And I remember we would watch the war on TV. I was petrified. I was really, really scared. It would make me really anxious that we were watching a war, and I used to feel bad for the Vietnamese that we were there. I was like 5. I was young, but still felt really bad for these people because we were in their country. And TV would always show women and children getting slaughtered, So there was no like parental warning. You might want to not let your 5-year-old watch this. um and the other time I remember news was when Martin Luther King died, and I lived in the city, and I remember we watched it on TV, but then where we lived there were riots, and it was summertime, and and the windows were all open, and I remember being petrified that we were going to get caught up in all this. So that record albums, another, is that what you also want?
Yeah.
So we used to have a big piece of furniture that was our record player.
Yeah.
But like
the big like dresser sized.
Like a dresser.
Yeah.
And my grandma always had like big band music playing in the house. My mom and dad, my pop loved music. So when I was with my grandma during the week, we listened on that big piece of furniture. And then when I lived in with my parents on the weekend, I remember we had a record player and lots of albums.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of albums.
Did Papa or anyone else in the house you like read the newspaper?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So newspaper was a daily thing for the men. Men read the newspaper. I didn't watch, my mom never read it. She did the crossword puzzle on a Sunday. My grandmom didn't read it, but my grandpa read it every night after he watched the news. He always had that paper in front of him. And my father, like cover to cover on a Sunday, the big thick newspaper.
Yeah. So how has your media consumption like evolved over the past, we'll call it 30 years? Can you describe the changes that you've seen in the types of stuff that you engage with?
So when I was raising children, you're saying the last 30 years, so that would include when I was raising kids. We rarely watched the news because we just didn't have time, or we didn't want you guys watching the crap that was on TV, we didn't want you hearing a lot of bad stuff that was happening. Bill Clinton's situation was happening when you guys were in middle school. And I remember you asked Gia asked me a question about the blue dress. And I'm like, oh no, we're not watching this.
Yeah.
And then as you guys got older, how did we get our news? I guess we watched it on TV, but I don't remember watching it. Like I remember we watched it in bed at night before we went to bed. I don't remember watching it downstairs.
You guys did always have that TV in your room that was always on.
Always on. So we probably got it. I know we got it from that. I did not read a newspaper. And then obviously once we got our computers, we were reading Philly Online, like to get newspaper, like local news. And now I'm embarrassed to say I get it from Facebook, or Instagram, or
everyone else. So does everyone else.
It's embarrassing. I don't watch it on. So let me just say, I was watching it obsessively in 2016 during the election, and it made me feel shitty and angry. And I was angry all the time about what was going on. And I never cared about elections before because I knew my life was not going to change one way or the other. But it felt like during the 2016 election, like having Donald Trump in office would have made everyone's life so miserable. And I was obsessive about watching the news. Also obsessive during COVID. I do remember I had to watch it at 5:30.
Yeah.
But when I started to feel crappy after watching the news, I'm like, this is bizarre that I'm watching something that's not making me feel good. So I
Mhm.
stopped watching it, and I haven't really gone back in the morning. I watch it in the morning to get the
Right.
weather.
Local news, yeah, local news.
All local news. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And by 7 o'clock, I watch the first 10 minutes, and I've limited myself to that. The first 10 minutes of like Good Morning America, the Today Show, which gives a brief overview of world news.
Yeah.
It's enough to not make me feel crappy.
Yeah. So you had mentioned something about this leads into my third question, which was like really about, I guess you can talk about your house and our house, was were there specific rules or like guidelines regarding media consumption that were enforced in your household? So like you said, there wasn't really a limit on how much TV you could watch. The news came on once a day. And then you also mentioned like you didn't want us so you enforce rules in your household as a parent, but like were there any rules as a kid?
They were happy I was quiet.
Yep. Okay, so then transitioning into like
But let me just tell you, they wanted me to read. They used to push me to read, and I was a really crappy reader, and I comprehend. And that was like an argument in our family. So they'd even want me to read the newspaper, thinking, well, she's not reading a book, maybe she'll read little clips in the newspaper. But I didn't understand what I was reading, so that was boring.
Yeah.
So I do remember that, but they didn't limit anything. No.
And so I guess I don't have this as a question on my thing, but like what were the rules regarding media consumption that you enforced when you now you were a parent?
Yeah. So I used to think, oh crap, I watch so much TV. This is probably not good for kids. It started to become a thing in the early 80s that too much TV consumption was not good for little children. So you personally did not start watching TV until you were around like 3 or 4. And you were, but so you didn't know anything about Ninja Turtles, and especially violent stuff. It was a thing. So I limit what you watched when you were little bit with Gia, and then all hell broke loose by the time Nick was a little kid because he was watching whatever you guys were watching.
Yeah.
So he had basically no limits. You had a lot of limits on what you watched when you were younger because you were the only one. I could do it. I could do that. But when you went to school, all your friends were watching all these shows and you were out of the loop of you couldn't play with kids because they were playing Ninja Turtles and Superman and all these things, and you wouldn't know. And I'm talking like when you were 3, 4, and 5, you were in preschool. You didn't know any of that stuff. So I'm like, am I really doing the right thing? So I would like let you start watching some of that. And so that was a limit. Once, and are you talking about computer use? Because then that
At some point, yeah.
that became a thing where we were like, we're only gonna get one computer in the house, in the kitchen, or it was in my office. Remember, we had the big gateway
Mhm.
computer.
Yep.
And we would limit, and actually it wasn't my office at the time, it was the playroom.
Yeah.
We limited how much you each did that. You had to have your homework done, blah blah blah. But then once you started lying about saying you did your home,
Sorry, this dog.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's okay. So then, you're a different animal. So you would lie that you did your homework so that you could do computers.
Mhm.
Your kids, I'm sorry, not your kids, your siblings, they made sure they did their homework so that they can get their computer time. It was really like an unknown back then of how it was that bad for you.
Yeah. I
just
remember because I remember going to boarding school and being, I think, one of the worst things for how I learned how to interact with the world was being 14 and having an unlimited and super fast connection to the internet. Like they didn't know then. It was just this cool thing that they were like, it'll help them learn. But we could download whatever we wanted
You know,
as we were, 14, 15, 16. Yeah.
but it was all just coming about at
Yeah,
that
of
time.
course.
And of course, the school said, we're going to limit this and blah, 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 but they didn't. They
No.
didn't. The rules they said they were going to.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned them, but what were some of the most influential media events or moments that you remember from like the past? I put 5 decades, but we can say 5 decades. And like, how did they affect your media consumption habits?
I kind of gave you that. So
Yeah.
the big events that I remember vividly as a child, were the death. And I was still young. I was born in 61. So Kennedy dying, JFK dying, Martin Luther King dying, Woodstock. And like those were things during my life that I saw on TV and the Vietnam War
Yeah.
that affected me emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I became an adult,
I think what's interesting is it made you, all of them, even into the last couple of years, they've all made you want to stop watching them. It
yes,
hasn't been like, oh, I need to watch more and more. They've all pushed you away. Like I remember, because 24-hour news wasn't a thing until I was a kid. Like I remember, the things that I remember were the things that were just first covered all day long, which were like, there was Columbine, the O.J. Simpson thing, the Bill Clinton thing, Princess Diana dying. Like that's when the 24-hour cycle started when I was a child. So that was like,
and you remember those
I
things.
remember those things because I remember you guys watching them and talking about them. They were on TV all the time. And then 9/11, when I was in high school, was like literally on the TV in the room as the planes were hitting, because we had friends whose parents worked there.
I was right there.
They wanted they wanted it to be like open so we could all be informed.
Katrina affected me emotionally. 9/11 affected me emotionally. I couldn't stop watching it because I remember having this thought: if I turn this TV off and go back to my beautiful little life, I felt like I didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I had to watch these people and Katrina and 9/11 all day long. Like I had to.
And I think for those first ones, I was interested in it, but then eventually it was like, I know as soon as something happens, I was like, oh, I don't have the bandwidth to get involved in this. So I'm gonna let this play out over here, and I need to just go about my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has somewhat but I think it's more of a just this shitty conditioning over time of like, I don't want to. It's the same shit over and over and over again, and I don't want to get involved in it and watch it. It is all depressing.
So depressing. I'm empathetic. So I was feeling like, what if I was on my rooftop? It's my family and my dog, and then we had to live there.
Yeah.
How many days, And it just, it affected me for sure.
So we can go through these next ones pretty quickly because you've kind of already answered most of them. But like, what types of media do you typically engage with daily now?
Streaming music all day long. You guys used to tell me to get Spotify before. I couldn't understand it. It's my life now. I on all day. So definitely that. Again, Facebook, Instagram. When I'm not doing anything, I do that. And maybe sometimes when I'm going on my computer and where it has like
whatever Apple pops or Google pops up. Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Cool. So I guess that also, the next question was like, are there any particular news sources or media outlets that you rely on to stay informed about current events, and why do you trust them? Which you kind of answered. I mean, all of those things they keep you informed because they're instantaneous.
Yeah. And I don't want anybody's opinion. I don't want I'm not watching CNN anymore. I don't watch Fox. I don't watch those cable news networks. I just want, give me the facts. I'm sure network TV is skewed, but I just want to know, are we going to war?
Which was my next question, was like, do you actively seek, and I think you used to seek out diverse perspectives or opinions to ensure that you're like exposed to different viewpoints?
Yeah. So I would, obviously I align more with what's going on CNN, but then I would want to know what's the rest of the world, what the other 50% of the people listening to,
Yeah.
and how did this one, like, especially during the pandemic, how does this one event that should not be politicized, how did that become like that? So I would watch both all the time and then get annoyed, and then I had to stop.
So the next one would then was just going to be, in that case, how do you navigate like the challenge of having like fake news and misinformation?
How do I navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the strategies that you employ are just really to stay out of it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had to. So the original strategy was, well, let me listen to both sides, and then I'll make my own opinion about this. But am I really trusting CNN? Am I real? And I'm definitely not trusting Fox. So
Mhm.
I just don't watch it, and I
That's,
just a
that's most
watered
people's
down.
answer. Yeah,
Uh,
that's most people's answer, is you're either going to decide to trust them or not trust them. Most people aren't going to do any extra research into it.
No, I don't have that bandwidth. Like,
Yeah.
I have friends that will take a deep dive into the subject that they're aligning with, so that when the subject comes up in a conversation as a group, they're going to have all the deep facts. I don't have the deep
Which is
facts.
the reason that they do it too. I know, and I know who you're talking about also. It's
Yeah.
just so they can be right in a dinner conversation.
Really, is that important in your in
Mhm.
life?
And then so the last one was kind of just more of a fun question, was just what is one of the most memorable shared media experiences or activities that you did with your family?
I used to love us getting together when we were in Hilton Head and watching videos,
Mhm.
like movies, that Hook, Goonies,
Yeah.
like those kind of movies. I love that. I liked when we all got together to
Yeah,
watch.
I think like I remember the Blockbuster down there, and I remember West Coast Video at home. It was like West Coast Video, a pizza,
Yeah.
and it was like Friday.
Friday night video pizza. That, if I think of that memories of your childhood, that warms my heart. That's fine.
Yeah. Cool. That's exactly 20 minutes, so we're good.
I'm glad that since you couldn't find an old person,
Mhm.
you came
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
anytime. All right.
I love you.
Love you too. Take care.
Bye.